Dino De Laurentiis, the King Kong Lives, was a relatively low budget for what we were doing. Had that been done in Hollywood, it would have been all these union workers, people that already knew how to build stuff for the camera. I got a call to fly from California back to North Carolina to a little town called Wilmington, where Dino De Laurentiis had set up his compound. So I wasn't working at the time, and I didn't see anything on the horizon very soon. So I accepted the job, and that was full of problems. I walked in with it being full of problems, and stupid enough to think that I could turn it around. It was ostensibly sound stages, but the stages were really large aluminum hangars with no soundproofing, and they were right in the flight path going into an Air Force base. The base actually was part military, part civilian, but it meant that it was noisy. But I managed to help things along. The way that the British view the design team, the art directors and production designers, versus the model makers, is that the model makers are supposed to be seen, not heard. Almost a caste system, if you will. So they were used to just giving orders and not getting any feedback, not accepting any feedback from the model makers. And the Italians were really nice, but they saw things another way that I never quite exactly figured it out. One of the things that was a big thorn in everybody's side was the quality of the trees that were being made in miniature. And these were in 1/2 inch to the foot scale, and for the most part, I think they were spruce. The model shop had been doing some really nice stuff, actually. So there was a big kind of emotional block that people weren't being able to communicate with each other very well. I was kind of lucky in a way because I was coming in with a fresh viewpoint of it. I wasn't emotionally tied to any of it. And I could see what the model shop was doing right. You know, they were working their butts off and doing some nice stuff. And I could see where the art department was doing their thing, but they weren't able to tell the model shop what they really needed. There was just a big lack of communication. Everybody was trying, but it wasn't working. And so one of the things I had them do was make a couple of their best trees that I knew they could reproduce. I wanted to show the stuff in the best light possible. Well, on shooting miniatures, the best light possible is daylight. There's very few cameramen and people on live action that know how to light miniatures. And it really is an art in itself, and almost a little bit of black magic, because people have a hard time quantifying exactly how to light miniatures, and you can't just do it as if it's a full-size stage. What had been happening is when the model makers would shoot Polaroid stills of their work and take it to the production designer to see, if this was a tree, they would always shoot it like this. Well, whenever you shoot a miniature, even if you took a real tree and somehow were able to shrink it down to, these were, I think the average tree was 18 inches and they went up to 36 inches. If you shoot any miniature, no matter how good it is, and you shoot it from high up on a model maker's table with tools and tweezers and hammers and those kind of things that ruin the scale, it's going to look more like a model. It's going to challenge the brain to accept it as anything but a model. So what I did was I took it, we set it up outside so that the camera was in scale down at the height that real trees would be, that the camera would be to real trees if you were standing there and you had the lens at 4.5 feet off the ground, and shot it that way with real sunlight, real shadows, We made the groundwork as nice as we could, and I shot it so that there were more real trees in the background, and a real horizon and real sky. I also got far enough away. I knew that the camera was never going to be up close on that tree because they'd have a hard time pulling depth of field and focusing on the foreground, as well as the guy in the ape suit that was 4.5 feet tall, I think. So I didn't get real close-ups of these trees because they didn't have to stand up to that. So I made sure we were far enough away. All the bunches of foliage on the branches were too uniform. The eye knows that nature is uniform to a degree, but then you expect to see more randomness. And we didn't have that in the trees. So we pruned the trees a little bit to get that. Anyway, we took those new pictures to the art department, and I didn't tell them what we did different or anything. And I just said, will these work for you? We've done some changes. And they loved them. So that worked. That helped me out enormously because right off the bat, they started to see some changes. And they didn't know exactly what the changes were, but they knew that now they liked it. So that helped me because from then on out, it helped my standing to go between the model shop and the art department. One of the reasons that they'd set that up in North Carolina was it's a right-to-work state, so they don't have unions. The whole concept right from the start was to be able to get people that you only had to pay $5 an hour to work. There wasn't union, there wasn't all of the union benefits to pay for. You could put people in conditions that they wouldn't accept out in Hollywood. So that brought the budget down a lot. I was used to working on things where you'd build something, you'd shoot it. The next day you'd come into dailies before you touched anything and see if the shot worked or not. Or if it didn't work, you'd get to see what didn't work. So you knew there was more economy in it because you knew you only had to work and rework that part, right? And everything else worked. Whereas back there, because they were located in North Carolina, they didn't have the facilities there to develop and print the film from that day. So instead of coming in the next day and seeing what there was, you'd have to wait 3 days for it to go to New York and be printed, and then somebody see it there. And then you just get a phone call saying they didn't like it. Plus, you would shoot things and strike the set because they had to wait so long and move on to the next thing. And if there had to be a reshoot, you'd have to rebuild it. That stuff would just be done. And therefore, there were very few reshoots. The quality suffered immensely because of that.